Millionaire followed his black waitress after work. The truth he uncovered changed everything. Monica, empty your pockets. Right now. The command sliced through the stillness of the sprawling estate's marble kitchen like a razor. Standing rigid in the doorway was Charles Whitaker, a 62-year-old real estate tycoon whose icy reputation was feared throughout the city. He blocked the only exit with his imposing figure, ensuring the housekeeper Monica James, a 35-year-old black woman who had worked in his mansion for the past 8 months, could not slip away. Monica paused in mid-motion, setting down the dish towel she had been using to dry her hands. Slowly, she turned to face him, her eyes steady, disturbingly calm. There was no trace of panic in her posture, nothing like the reaction Charles had expected. Instead, there was a quiet steel in her gaze, as though she had been waiting for this very moment. "Is there a problem, Mr. Whitaker?" she asked, her voice carrying the professional poise she always maintained. Yet, beneath that smooth, respectful tone, he sensed an undercurrent of quiet defiance he had never heard before. "My wife says her diamond bracelet is missing from the master suite," Charles snapped, crossing his arms with deliberate menace. "A diamond bracelet worth more than $15,000. You were the only person who cleaned in there today." He let the accusation sink into the cavernous kitchen, the words dripping with suspicion. Charles had built his multimillion-dollar real estate empire on ruthless assumptions about people like Monica, people he believed were easy to intimidate, easy to control, easily discarded. Throughout his career, he had quietly terminated dozens of black employees with similar allegations of theft, confident they would leave without a fight, too afraid of retaliation or tarnishing their fragile reputations. But Monica merely nodded, as if carefully digesting every syllable. Her hands stayed steady, her breathing measured. No tremor, no flinch, no sign of guilt. She calmly folded the dish towel with a precision that made Charles feel uneasy. "And your first instinct," she said, raising an eyebrow ever so slightly, "was to accuse me." Charles bristled, annoyed by her composed reaction. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said, his tone shifting to the familiar, condescending register he used in corporate negotiations. "I know you have a daughter to support, Monica. Things get tight. Maybe you just made a mistake, forgot what belonged to you." What happened next stunned him. Monica smiled. But it was not the fearful, apologetic smile he was accustomed to seeing from accused staff. This was a knowing smile, a blade-sharp smile, the kind that appears when someone's suspicions are finally confirmed. "Mr. Whitaker," she replied, moving with deliberate slowness as she pulled her smartphone from her pocket, "before I empty my pockets, why don't we call the police? I'm sure they'd be extremely interested in investigating a diamond bracelet worth $15,000. Charles hesitated, thrown off by her confidence. This was not how a guilty housekeeper was supposed to behave. She should have been pleading, crying, bargaining, not calmly offering to involve law enforcement with the assurance of an experienced attorney. Over the past 8 months, Monica had studied Charles with sharp eyes. She'd witnessed how he belittled the Hispanic landscapers, how he spoke with thinly disguised disgust to the black delivery drivers at the pharmacy, how he referred to people like them with that smug sense of inherited superiority. She'd listened to him rant about lazy welfare types and how some people are just wired to steal. That won't be necessary if you just cooperate. "Oh, but I insist," Monica cut in, interrupting him with a confidence that made the words sound almost musical. And for the first time since she'd set foot in the Whitaker mansion, her voice held none of its carefully measured subservience. "Actually," she continued, tapping her phone with a satisfied gleam in her eye, I have a few very interesting things I'd like to share with the officers when they arrive. Charles blinked, thrown off balance. A vibration buzzed from Monica's phone, and she glanced at the screen. Her smile widened, an expression that sent an involuntary shiver down his spine. Perfect timing, she murmured to herself, sending a brief reply before tucking her phone back in her pocket. Looks like I'll have company sooner than expected tonight. Charles watched, momentarily paralyzed, as Monica finally began to turn out her uniform pockets, her house keys, a stick of lip balm, a grocery receipt, and a scrap of paper with a handwritten note. No diamond bracelet. No evidence of theft. Satisfied, she showed him her empty palms. There, she said, the tone crisp and unbothered. Nothing here. Feel better? Before Charles could formulate a reply, the doorbell rang. Then it rang again. And again. The urgent chime sliced through the elegant mansion, each ring growing sharper, like the warning cry of an approaching storm. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitaker, Monica said, stepping toward the front door with unshakable composure, but I think our conversation is just beginning. Charles stood rooted in place, a wave of confusion crashing through him. For the first time in a long, privileged life, he realized he might have catastrophically underestimated the woman who had cleaned his home for nearly a year. There was something in the way Monica walked each step, deliberate, full of authority, that told him the story was about to go far beyond a missing bracelet. What was happening before Charles Whitaker's eyes was something he could never have anticipated, and yet, the poised calm on Monica's face made it feel as if this was precisely the moment she had been preparing for, carefully and patiently, through all these long months. From the hallway, voices echoed, some in clear English, others in flowing Spanish. Charles frowned, trying to count how many strangers Monica had somehow let into his heavily secured mansion, and why, in God's name, did she even have keys to do such a thing. Mr. Whitaker, Monica called, her voice ringing through the grand entrance with a commanding force he had never heard from her before. Would you please join us in the living room? We have a great deal to discuss. For the first time in decades, Charles felt a cold chill of powerlessness slip down his spine. Monica, his housekeeper, was orchestrating this entire moment with the precision of someone who had planned it for far longer than he could imagine. If you find this story about how power and appearances can deceive as compelling as I do, be sure to subscribe for the next chapter, because this single accusation was about to explode into a revelation that would alter every life tangled in its path. Charles followed Monica into the lavish living room, trying to steady his breathing. There, comfortably seated on his Italian leather sectional, were three black women of various ages, none of whom he had given permission to enter his home. A fourth figure, a sharply dressed man in a tailored suit, was methodically arranging a stack of legal folders across the marble coffee table. What the hell is going on here? Charles roared, the sound of his voice rattling against the mansion's gilded crown moldings. Monica, who are these people? How did they even get inside my house? Mr. Whitaker, Monica began, her calm carrying a terrible authority that rattled him to the bone. Allow me to introduce Mrs. Johnson, who worked for you 2 years ago. Mrs. Williams, who lasted only 6 months. And Mrs. Davis, who gave 4 years of service before you accused her of stealing a ring which later turned up in your wife's gym bag. Charles felt the blood rush from his face. He recognized those women. Vaguely, shamefully. They were former housekeepers, all dismissed on allegations of theft that had never been conclusively proven. They had left under a cloud of shame, their references obliterated, their reputations in ruins. And this, Monica went on, gesturing toward the man in the suit, is Dr. Michael Roberts, a civil rights attorney specializing in workplace discrimination and wrongful termination. Dr. Roberts rose politely and offered his hand. Charles ignored it, scowling. Mr. Whitaker, the attorney continued evenly, for the past 8 months, my client, Ms. Monica James, has been documenting a consistent pattern of racial discrimination and false accusations of theft against black women employed in this residence. Charles exploded, "That is absurd. I have every right to protect my home if things go missing, and the people with the most access are obviously that black women are the first suspects." Monica finished for him, cutting through his protest with a voice now tight with rage. That black housekeepers must be thieves. That our families and our dignity mean nothing to you. Mrs. Johnson, the older woman sitting closest to the fireplace, spoke up in a trembling voice. You accused me of stealing $500 from your office, she reminded him painfully. You told me I was typical of my people and that I should be grateful you didn't have me arrested. I lost my job, my reference, and nearly my home because no one else would hire me. Charles shifted awkwardly, unable to meet her eyes. I found the money later, he stammered, voice weak. It was in my coat pocket. But you never called me, Mrs. Johnson finished. You never tried to repair the damage. Monica moved to the window, gazing out over the immaculately trimmed hedges. For 8 months, she had served in this mansion, cleaning floors and polishing silver, all the while working undercover with the instincts of a trained journalist. Years earlier, she had been forced out of her reporting job when she dared to expose racist hiring practices among Seattle's elite. Bankrupt, she had accepted a housekeeping position just to survive and then discovered that Charles Whitaker was precisely the predator she had once written about. Do you know what first gave you away? She asked, turning back, eyes flashing with a cold brilliance that made Charles feel pinned against the wall. It was the day you laughed on the phone with your lawyer about how easy it was to fire the colored help whenever you needed a scapegoat. Charles felt his stomach twist. He vaguely remembered that phone call but never thought a maid might overhear. Or maybe it was when you told your accountant that missing jewelry was a convenient excuse to get rid of people you considered beneath your family, Monica continued. Quote, keep those people away from decent families. Dr. Roberts unfolded a series of documents with measured care. Over these 8 months, Ms. James recorded conversations, took photographs, and gathered witness statements, he explained. We have evidence showing you falsely accused and terminated at least 12 black women over the last 5 years. Charles tried to retake the narrative, voice cracking with fury. You can't prove a thing. Monica calmly unlocked her phone, scrolled, and tapped play. Charles's voice filled the room, crackling and hateful. This Monica seems perfect. She looks like she'd steal if given the chance. When we need a scapegoat, she'll fit right in. They always have a cousin or somebody desperate for cash. Silence slammed down on the luxurious living room like a stone. Charles looked around and saw nothing but the judgment in these women's eyes, the collapse of his own carefully guarded empire of intimidation. My wife's diamond bracelet, he rasped, desperate to pivot the conversation, it's still missing. You can't deny that. Monica stepped over to the stone fireplace, calmly lifted the heavy family portrait, and revealed the diamond bracelet lying behind it. The jewels glimmered in the lamplight, almost mocking him. It was right where your wife left it, Monica said coolly. Behind your wedding photo. She removed it last night before she showered and forgot about it. I found it this morning while cleaning, but decided to see how far your racist imagination would take you. Charles nearly collapsed against the arm of the couch. His knees felt waterlogged. For 8 months he had treated Monica like an invisible piece of furniture, just another disposable object in his gleaming world of wealth. Now, looking into her sharp, unyielding eyes, he realized she had become the most dangerous person he could have ever underestimated. "You don't understand who you're dealing with," Charles snapped suddenly, trying to cling to his power like a drowning man. "I have lawyers, contacts, judges who owe me favors. You think you can just barge into my house and humiliate me?" Monica's eyes glimmered with a dangerous calm. She watched with precise interest as Charles whipped out his phone and frantically dialed. "Harvey," Charles barked, pacing near the leather armchair, "it's Charles Whittaker. I need you here right now. I have intruders making outrageous claims." His voice faltered as he listened, color draining from his face. "What do you mean you can't represent me?" Conflict of interest. Charles's grip on the phone trembled. "Harvey, we've been friends 20 years. What the hell does conflict of interest even mean?" Dr. Roberts quietly stacked another folder, almost pitying him. "Mr. Whittaker," he explained, "our firm already represents Ms. James and the other women in this room. No ethical lawyer can touch your case now." Charles tried 3 more calls, hands shaking, but each conversation ended the same: polite apologies, sudden schedule conflicts, excuses that felt painfully rehearsed. In the span of 15 minutes, the man who could once open any door with a wave of his checkbook was completely, devastatingly alone. How did you do this?" Charles demanded, voice ragged, staring at Monica with a mixture of horror and awe. Monica stepped over to Charles Whittaker's grand bookcase, running her fingers along the rows of expensive leather-bound volumes, the kind he collected for show, not substance. A faint smile traced her lips. "Mr. Whittaker," she began, turning toward him with unshakable calm, "for the past 8 months, I haven't only been cleaning your house. I was studying you. Every phone call you took while I was in earshot, every name you dropped, every favor you whispered or demanded." She reached behind the rows of books, pulling out a small digital recorder, then another, and another, and another. Charles's jaw dropped as Monica lined them up on the polished coffee table like a row of tiny weapons. "I discovered you have a very interesting habit," she continued, her voice ice cold. "Every Thursday morning, you make your most compromising phone calls right here in the library, assuming I was too busy vacuuming the hallway to hear you." She placed the last recorder down with a deliberate click. 8 months of conversations, Mr. Whittaker. 8 months of you bragging about how you rig municipal contracts, bribe inspectors, manipulate insider deals for your real estate speculation. For a moment, Charles could barely breathe. Mrs. Davis, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up, her voice breaking the heavy quiet. "She came to me 6 months ago," she explained, glancing toward Monica with admiration. "She told me she believed I was innocent and that she had a plan to prove it. I thought she was crazy, a maid going up against a powerful millionaire. But..." Dr. Roberts, the attorney, stepped forward, opening a new folder as he cut in, "But Monica James isn't just a housekeeper, Mr. Whittaker. She's an investigative journalist. A Columbia University graduate who specialized in exposing corruption among the elite. She lost her reporting job at the Seattle Herald after investigating discriminatory practices at companies very much like yours." Charles felt as if the rug had been yanked out from under his expensive loafers. For 8 humiliating months, he treated Monica like an unthinking, disposable servant, while in reality, she had been the single most dangerous person to ever cross his threshold. "The job as your housekeeper," Monica continued, "was only a cover. I needed unrestricted access to your life, your routine, your conversations. And you gave me all of it on a silver platter because you never looked beyond the color of my skin or the uniform I wore. Then, with a flourish, Monica lifted her phone and tapped the screen. A live stream app was already broadcasting to the world tens of thousands of viewers. Comments scrolled past so quickly they were impossible to read. Right now, Monica said with chilling calm, over 15,000 people are watching this conversation live on Instagram. They're hearing, in real time, every word you ever spoke about getting rid of the colored help. Charles lunged forward, desperate to end the broadcast, but Dr. Roberts stepped between them, blocking him. Mr. Whitaker, the lawyer warned, any attempt to interfere with this documentation will be interpreted as witness intimidation. Charles could no longer hide the terror boiling inside him. His voice cracked, raw and uncontrolled. "You've destroyed me," he shouted, shaking with rage. 20 years building my name, my companies, my reputation, and you've burned it to the ground in a single afternoon. No, Monica corrected, her tone as measured as a teacher schooling an unruly child. You destroyed your own reputation with decades of discrimination, cruelty, and corruption. We simply documented who you truly are behind that facade of respectability. Mrs. Johnson stood, pulling an envelope from her pocket with trembling fingers. Monica helped me file a proper lawsuit, she announced, her voice surprisingly steady. Not just for wrongful termination, but for defamation, emotional distress, and racial discrimination. My lawyers say the evidence she collected is ironclad. We're all suing, added Mrs. Williams, meeting Charles's wild-eyed stare with steady defiance. Monica showed us our rights. She connected us with experts. She uncovered evidence we didn't even know existed. Charles looked around his own living room, his sanctuary of power, and realized every face there held a piece of a puzzle he had never noticed being assembled. Monica had used his arrogance and prejudice as the very fuel to destroy him. His phone began to vibrate endlessly, messages from business partners, old friends, the golf club, high society contacts. Words like videos, exposure, what is this about, scrolled across his screen in a horrifying litany. His secretary had left 12 frantic messages about reporters calling, asking questions, demanding answers. Monica calmly checked her own phone. Harrison Properties is already getting calls, she observed coolly. 3 major contracts cancelled in the last hour. Funny how fast people distance themselves when the truth comes out. Charles's mind reeled. That moment in the kitchen, when Monica had so confidently offered to call the police, it had not been a burst of courage. It had been the final move of a strategy months in the making, executed with the perfect timing of a chess master. Under the crushing weight of their collective gaze, Charles felt the truth sinking in. Monica had never been a powerless maid, she was a seasoned professional, and he had walked right into her plan, giving her every tool she needed. But as the live stream comments multiplied and his public image collapsed before his eyes, one single, horrifying question echoed through Charles Whitaker's mind: if she planned all this with such precision, what else does she know? What else hasn't she revealed yet? End this stream. He screamed, lunging again toward her phone. Dr. Roberts stepped forward, calm as ever. "Mr. Whitaker," he repeated, "any interference will be considered witness intimidation. You've been warned." The viewer count ticked past 30,000. Monica watched the panic on Charles's face with almost scientific interest. She had studied him, memorized every way he tried to regain control, every defense mechanism. She had prepared for each one. "You don't understand," Charles bellowed, voice cracking. "I am Charles Whitaker. I built half this city. You are. We're what?" Monica interrupted, slicing through his rant with surgical precision. Troublesome black women who don't know their place say it, Mr. Whitaker. Right now. 35,000 people are listening. Charles's phone rang and vibrated until he could barely stand the noise. Panicked messages from his lawyer, frantic questions from local news outlets, business partners demanding emergency meetings. It was a digital avalanche. Monica, he tried once more, grasping for even a sliver of his former power, we can handle this, civilly. How much do you want? 50,000, 100,000 each. The silence that followed was like a slap across his face. Mrs. Johnson shook her head in disbelief. He still doesn't get it, she whispered. Monica reached calmly into her bag and pulled out a thick folder, flipping it open with practiced ease. Mr. Whitaker, she said, her voice as cold and precise as a scalpel, for 8 months I have gathered not just your hateful words but the entirety of your corrupt dealings. She spread photographs across the gleaming table. Charles recoiled. There he was, in color photographs, passing thick envelopes to city inspectors, signing off on falsified safety reports, sharing whiskey with politicians in exchange for land deals. How did you get these? His voice was nothing more than a horrified whisper. Monica's smile was merciless. Remember when I told you I needed weekends off to work a second job to pay my daughter's tuition? She asked lightly. My daughter graduated 5 years ago. On those weekends, I was following you. Taking these pictures. Dr. Roberts laid down yet another folder. We also have bank records, Mr. Whitaker, he added smoothly. Irregular payments. Kickbacks. Recordings of you promising city contracts in exchange for campaign donations. 12 separate public projects you overcharged in the last 3 years. Charles collapsed into a chair, breathing shallow, trying to comprehend the scale of his own destruction. You were pretending to be a mate just to destroy me, he said, his voice strangled. Not to destroy you, Monica corrected, almost with a professorial gentleness, to expose you. There's a difference. Her phone rang again. She answered, placing it on speaker so everyone could hear. Monica, this is Rebecca Chun from the Seattle Herald. We're preparing a cover story on racial discrimination among Seattle's wealthy. Can you talk? Of course, Rebecca, Monica answered, calm and measured. I have a great deal to share. The calls continued, one after another. CNN, The Washington Post, NBC. Each new name deepened the lines of horror in Charles's face. You know what's most ironic? Monica continued, placing the final pieces of evidence neatly back into her folder. If you had treated me with the smallest shred of human dignity, none of this would have happened. I was just trying to feed my family and do my work, but you refused to see past the color of my skin. The viewer count on the live stream had climbed to over 40,000 and rising. 50,000 viewers and climbing. Comments poured across the screen like a digital flood. Justice at last. That man is disgusting. Monica is a hero. Charles Whitaker, desperate beyond reason, played his final card. You know I'm going to sue you all, he snarled, his voice half broken, for defamation, invasion of privacy, conspiracy. With what lawyers? Dr. Roberts asked dryly, his tone dripping with controlled scorn. Your 5 go-to law firms have already informed us they cannot represent you due to conflicts of interest. And with what money? Monica added, cool as ever. Because by my calculations, between the lawsuits we're going to file, the criminal investigations that will follow, and the investors who have already started jumping ship, Whitaker Properties will be dead in the water within 6 months. As if on cue, the doorbell rang again. Two plainclothes detectives stepped into the room, badges in hand. "Mr. Whitaker," said the senior officer, his tone unflinching, "we need to speak with you about irregularities in municipal contracts. We have a warrant to search these premises." Charles looked around wildly. His home, once a fortress of wealth and privilege, was now ground zero for his public unraveling. Witnesses, cameras, documents, a live broadcast to tens of thousands, all dismantling everything he had ever built. How he rasped, staring at Monica with something close to horror. "How did you pull this off with such surgical precision?" Monica rose, adjusting her blouse with the same quiet dignity she had carried through 8 months of unacknowledged labor. "Simple, Mr. Whitaker," she answered with lethal calm. "You underestimated me. Because you could never see beyond your own prejudice. To you, I was just another black housekeeper, invisible, ignorant, disposable." She lifted her purse from the arm of the sofa and paused to look around the room at the other women who had finally found their voices, at the cameras recording this moment for the world. "The irony," Monica continued, her voice steady as a blade, "is that if you had ever truly seen me, you would have realized I was the last person on earth you should have chosen as your enemy." As the detectives began methodically searching the house, the live stream continued to roll, documenting each humiliating moment of Charles Whitaker's spectacular fall. One question seemed to hang in the air, almost visible in the tension: could a man who had spent decades building walls of privilege and prejudice finally learn that true strength often comes from the very people he tried to keep invisible, or would his arrogance blind him even now, as he crumbled under the weight of his own corruption? 6 months later, Monica James sat behind a sleek glass desk on the 22nd floor of downtown Seattle, gazing out at a city skyline she had once thought beyond her reach. The title etched on her office door, Director of Investigative Journalism, the Seattle Herald, was more than just a promotion. It was vindication. It was power reclaimed. Her salary had tripled. Her story, the one that had exposed Charles Whitaker's reign of exploitation, had become a landmark case in American journalism, a national milestone on the fight against systemic racism and workplace discrimination. Her book, Invisible by Design: How the Elite Perpetuate Racism, had spent 16 weeks on the bestseller list, changing conversations in boardrooms and classrooms alike. 3 universities had already offered her positions to teach the next generation of fearless reporters. Across town, Charles Whitaker walked the hollow, echoing hallways of what was left of Whitaker Properties. Out of 87 buildings, only 12 remained under his control. The rest had been liquidated to pay for settlements, legal fees, and restitution to the women he had wronged. 3 formal criminal charges now shadowed his every step: tax fraud, bribery of public officials, and systematic racial discrimination. Mrs. Johnson, once wrongfully accused, had used her settlement to launch a cleaning agency that only hired women who had faced racial bias. Mrs. Williams returned to college, finally finishing her long-delayed nursing degree. Dr. Roberts, emboldened by this landmark case, expanded his law practice with an entire department dedicated to fighting workplace discrimination against black workers. Back in her new office, Monica opened a letter that made her pause. "Dear Monica, your story gave me the courage not to give up. I was fired after investigating corruption at City Hall. Thanks to you, I'm building my own case now. Someday, I hope to stand up the way you did." Monica smiled, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. That was the real victory, inspiring others to rise. That afternoon, her phone rang again. Rebecca Chun, her old contact at the Seattle Herald. "Monica," Rebecca said, her voice sparkling with excitement, "the Pulitzer board just confirmed it. You won the Pulitzer Prize for Investigative Journalism." A rush of emotion surged through Monica's chest, but she held her composure. As she left for the awards ceremony, Monica passed by the shuttered former headquarters of Whitaker Properties. A huge for rent sign now covered the marble entrance, and through the window, she could see stripped bare offices where an empire built on bigotry and exploitation had once plotted its future. The irony was impossible to ignore. Charles Whitaker had spent his entire life trying to render black women invisible. In the end, it was precisely that invisibility which had allowed Monica to observe, to listen, to gather every weapon she needed until he practically handed her the keys to his own destruction. True revenge, Monica had realized, was never about sinking to an oppressor's level. It was about rising so far above them that they became irrelevant, a footnote in your story of triumph. 3 blocks away, in a cramped apartment he could barely afford, Charles watched the evening news. The top story showed Monica standing proudly at City Hall, receiving a civic honor. He wondered, for what felt like the 1000th time, how could I have missed it? How could I have let her do this to me? The answer was simple. Men like Charles Whitaker would always fail to see the strength of the people they sought to silence. And that blindness, that fatal arrogance, was what made them so vulnerable to being toppled by those they considered powerless.